4th of September 25 and August. Man, what am I talking about? September. Yeah. And I'm just looking. China had its 80th parade of victory over Japan the other day. Yesterday actually. And it was the first time I got a feeling it looks as if China's going to look to dominate really. And it's just so sad, because the West welcomed China and Russia. I mean, 1989, China was very poor. Everyone was going about in bikes. But now it is looking at that parade, the sort of aesthetics of it, looking at the leader going about in that sort of, what was it? Peeping out from the top of a car or something. I mean, it looked daft really, but when you saw all the armoury and stuff, yeah, it does look bad to me, and it's the first time I've felt it is looking as if China, Russia, North Korea, etc., are going to look to dominate the world. Unfortunately, I don't know why anybody feels that. Any country feels that way. It's a sort of inferiority complex, really. I think because if you look at Japan, like, two cities get nuclear bombed, and yet it became the second biggest economy in the world for quite a few decades. Very soon after Second World War, with the Marshall Plan, we done everything we could to help them. Well, America, God bless America, and that. So it's just tragic, and we tried to help Russia and China, but around about 2000, they decided they were going the ego route, and also I feel that they're making a fool of Trump as well, and he done a tweet saying he won't forget or whatever, something like that, that Putin, Dom Xiaoping or whatever his name is, and the North Korean guy are all there. Syria was there, the leader of Syria, the leader of Iran. It's tragic, really. And it is ironic that Japan used to have power over China, but they turned Western. I mean, they're part of the Western family. And then he also, I don't know what I'm talking about. I asked Google Gemini about it, and it was just saying the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. It is ironic because September the 3rd was the day of the start of World War II as well. Well, for Britain, anyway. Us and France came in September the 3rd, 1939, I think. America didn't get involved until December 41. I mean, they were helping us, but the Republicans and the people didn't want involved. They were being isolationist about it. And apparently it was a victory in the war of resistance against Japan. So I wonder about. So they're celebrating victory over Japan, but it was probably us that done it, or America, actually. And it is ironic, as I say, that America bombed two Japanese cities, but the two countries became close friends afterwards, both flourished. China could do the same, but they've gone the ego route. Same with Russia and that. The event was known for presence of several world leaders, Putin, Kim Jong-un, key aspects of the parade, and the leaders' attendance, a show of unity. I mean, it looked to me, Putin anyway, it didn't look as if there was any sign of Parkinson's, from what I could see. It was those three at the front, and it was to show as a powerful display of solidarity and a challenge to the United States and its allies. I mean, as a joke, we're not enemies. I don't know, I just can't understand how a leader or a people can think that way, at this time. And of course, we've seen a lot of Chinese move to the West. It seems to be highly desirable. Whereas it looks like hardly anyone gets citizenship, Chinese citizenship. I mean, I asked Google Gemini and it said we couldn't give figures, but it's very hard to become a Chinese citizen. And in 2010, that was the figures it gave me. It was like 1,025 or something like that. So I'll talk about more about that later. Yeah, the three leaders were seen together on a viewing platform overlooking Tiananmen Square, and a photo of them working side by side garnered significant attention. And it had a military display feature event, a wide array of advanced weaponry, including hypersonic missiles, underwater drones, and other military hardware. I mean, it is a joke, it really is, if it wasn't dangerous. And the guest list, the parade also drew leaders from the other countries, including Iran, Belarus, and several nations in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Africa. There's Africa letting us down again, really. Notably, leaders from the US, Western Europe, and Japan were not in attendance. Political context, the parade took place amid increasing global tensions, particularly between China and the US, and Russia's ongoing conflict with Ukraine. I mean, really, with China, economically, we need to unwind from China totally. I know Trump just done a deal that Biden was saying that Nvidia shouldn't sell chips there, but the Chinese-born CEO said done a deal with Trump so that Nvidia will give America 10% for the deal or whatever. And they're not selling their top-class chips, but people say that even their lower-class chips will be very useful for China for their military. It is amazing to think that in Britain, Boris Johnson was in favour of, was it Huawei being in charge of our phone system in some way. I can't remember what it was. That was like 2018, and I get scrapped. And anyway, in his speech, Xi Jinping said the world was facing a choice between peace or war. Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, you're the war. It's us that want peace. And he asserted that China would not be intimidated by bullies. Here we go with the ego again, the inferiority complex, really. Historical. Kim Jong-un's rare appearance. The attendance of North Korea's Kim Jong-un was particularly significant, as it was a rare foreign trip for him, and the first time he had been seen at the same event with both Xi and Putin. Following the parade, reports indicated that Kim and Putin held a formal meeting. Yeah, it showed you them get into a car together, and it was quite comical because they were deciding who would go in the front, the near side. It was a bit of a joke. Is China a danger to the world? Yeah, I was asking that, yeah. And the answer is yes, unfortunately. Military expansion. China's modern military is unprecedented, with rapid advancements, etc. I mean, I think they will get to Taiwan in not in the near future. Human rights record. Other issues include a lack of freedom of speech, press and religion, and the suppression of dissent. Economic practices. Unfair practices such as state subsidies, intellectual property theft, and use of forced labour. Yeah, we need to sort of unwind from China economically as much as we can, really. Some nations, including the US and those in the global south, have imposed tariffs and other measures to counteract what they see as a flood of low-cost Chinese goods that harm domestic industries. And then there's debt trap diplomacy. That's through its Belt and Road Initiative, which I think China started around about 2014, and has extended massive loans to developing countries for infrastructure projects. Critics argue that these loans are often structured in a way that leaves countries heavily indebted to China, giving Beijing significant political and economic leverage, and challenging the international order. Some view China as a direct challenge to the liberal international order. Liberal's the key word there, established after World War II. I mean, they could be part of it. They could be part of the West, like Japan is. I mean, West means the liberal countries, really, the desirable countries where people want to move to, especially Chinese. They argue that China's rise, coupled with its authoritarian political model, threatens the principles of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And here's counter arguments, but personally I think they're wrong anyway. No intent to deliberately harm. Mutual economic benefit. Focus on domestic needs. China threat is irrational. And global cooperation. Despite the tensions, China is an essential partner in addressing global challenges like climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation. Well, pandemics, it's not really something we would want to talk about, is it? In conclusion, whether China is a danger depends on one's perspective. And then I was just wondering, since people are always saying that people move for economic reasons primarily, so I was wondering, are people from the second and third world moving to China? While the narrative is often centred on people leaving China, the country has also become a destination for people, both from the West and from developing nations. However, the scale and reasons for this are different from the major flows seen in many Western countries. So really, there's nowhere near as many of them. We're talking about 5% of what's coming to the West, or probably less than that. Migration from the West, primarily skilled professionals. They're not permanent in the traditional sense. They're often highly skilled professionals who are there for a specific job contract. Economic opportunities. The main pull factor for this group is economic opportunity, China's rapid economic growth. So these people are just temporary. And they're not going to try for citizenship. Temporary residence. For most Westerners, their stay in China is often temporary, tied to their employment or specific project. Gaining permanent residency in China is notoriously difficult, with only a small number of people holding it. So there you go. That does away with the argument that people are just going for economic reasons to the West or whatever. It's not that at all, really. Cultural and lifestyle factors. The strict regulations and social norms can be a challenge. The government's control over the internet and general lack of free expression are also significant factors. Migration from developing countries. So there's the word for it. Developing countries. Students and business people. China has become a popular destination for students from developing nations. So they are getting a lot from not as many near us coming to the West, particularly from Africa and Southeast Asia, and business people and traders, but none of them are getting citizenship as far as I can see. Economic drivers. The primary driver for some from developing nations is economic. They are often seeking. It is economic. They're often seeking better jobs and educational opportunities than available in their home countries. Irregular, so that's illegal, as we used to call it. There's also been reports of irregular or illegal migration from neighbouring countries, particularly along the borders of Myanmar and North Korea. Well, they're probably even worse than China, so reasons for this can vary from economic hardships to fleeing conflict or political instability. I'm guessing there's hardly any, though. Limited pathways to integration. While the number of migrants from these regions is growing, they often face significant challenges in social and cultural integration. Pathways to permanent residency are limited, and they may be vulnerable to exploitation or discrimination. In summary, while China is not a traditional destination for large-scale migration in the same way as many Western countries, it is a destination for a growing number of people, particularly the high-skilled workers. The push and pull factors are largely economic, but the lack of clear and accessible pathways to permanent residency and integration means that for most it is a temporary experience rather than a long-term relocation. So I just asked it how many become Chinese citizens each year. Accurate data on the number of people who become Chinese citizens each year is extremely difficult to find. China's government does not regularly publish comprehensive statistics on naturalization, and the process itself is widely considered to be one of the most restrictive in the world. So there we go, it's one of the most restrictive in the world. So let's get an idea. Very low numbers. The number of people who naturalise as Chinese citizens annually is very low. especially for a country of its size. I mean, it is the second biggest economy. It's going to become the first very soon. A 2010 census figure cited that only 1,448 people had been naturalised in the entire country. So there we go. I think it's the most populous country in the world. Perhaps India's overtook it now, but in 2010, apparently, the number of people who became naturalised Chinese citizens, who got Chinese citizenship, was 1,448. Compare that to Britain, who last year I think took about 1.4 million from developing countries, basically. While this number has likely increased since then, it remains a minuscule fraction of the population and a number of foreign residents. And the focus is on talent. The Chinese government's policy on naturalisation and residency for foreigners is heavily focused on attracting and retaining highly skilled professionals and individuals who can contribute significantly to the country's economic development. It's not a system designed for large-scale family-based or humanitarian immigration. Next point, permanent residency is also rare. While not the same as citizenship, obtaining a Chinese green card, permanent residency, is also very difficult. It is often referred to as one of the most difficult to acquire in the world. So there you go, second biggest economy in the world. We're always hearing in the West, people are coming for economic reasons, whereas China, the second biggest economy, it's not taking anybody. It is often referred to as one of the most difficult to acquire in the world, with only a few thousand being granted each year. This is a clear indicator of China's restrictive immigration policy. In contrast with other countries, this stands in stark contrast to countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, which have much more open immigration systems and naturalise hundreds of thousands of new citizens each year. The lack of publicly available, up-to-date and detailed naturalisation statistics from the Chinese government makes it impossible to provide a precise annual number. The general consensus among experts is that the figure is in the hundreds or low thousands per year. So there you go, hundreds or low thousands per year are getting citizenship, Chinese citizenship, or even residency, green cards, a number that is not significant in the context of a country with a population of over 1.4 billion people. I was just looking to see how many Chinese become American, well, last year, 2024, and it says 24,300 people born in China became naturalised US citizens in fiscal year 2024. I thought it'd be a lot more, but I think a lot more are coming over irregular and stuff. I'll check Britain as well. I'm just checking Australia here, 2024, and former Chinese citizens were conferred Australian citizenship in the fiscal year 2023-24 was 7,561. I thought it'd be a lot more, but and in the UK for the calendar year 2024, 78,000. That's even more than the other two. With the largest group in June 24, Chinese nationals were the fourth largest group of long-term non-EU immigrants to the UK with 78,000 arrivals. But that doesn't reflect who became citizens yet. It's just new immigrants, 78,000. A lot of them are students, but they can then get right of leave if they're still around about for 5 years, and then they can apply for citizenship. Oh yeah, a lot of these were probably Hong Kong residents, but which Boris Johnson was said we had to do. So there's going to be quite a few. I think Boris Johnson felt we had an obligation. I never felt that, and I don't know if the British public felt that, or a big chunk of the British public. Anyway, that's all I'm looking at just now. It was just scary seeing that march. Yeah, that parade where a guy was driving in a expensive car with popping at the top, the hatch at the top. I mean, it looked a bit pathetic, really, but he probably thought it looked fantastic. It's so sad. I mean, there's so many countries around the world that are eco-based, and it seems that people don't want to live in these, but they themselves feel that as well. You know, superiority seems to be an inferiority complex, really. As I say, like Japan became part of the West. You know, people talk about the West as if it's one colour or whatever, but Japan disproves that. You know, South Korea as well. But it's just tragic that China and Russia, the West did all they could to make them just part of the family, really, the family of Earth. But instead, we've got to be split into two because they want to dominate. It's tragic, really. Anyway, that's the first time I felt a slight fear about it. Maybe I should have felt the fear quite a while ago, you know. But in fact, I'll ask Gemini. I just asked when did it become clear that Russia and China were going to become, you know, I mean, whatever you might call it, the West or the peaceful liberal nations or whatever. Apparently, it was 2014 was a turning point, so it says. Saying it was a gradual process with roots in the post-Cold War developments. Um, let's see. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Russia was widely seen as a potential partner for the West, with many hoping for a transition to democracy and a market economy. I mean, that's tragic. They could just be just another peaceful Earth nation flourishing. China, meanwhile, was focused on its economic reform and integration into the global economy, culminating in its entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. During this time, both countries were viewed more as opportunities for trade and engagement rather than threats. And here we go, the turning point, 2014. A critical shift in perception occurred in 2014 with two major events. Russia's annexation of Crimea. This act of aggression against a sovereign neighbour shattered the illusion of Russia as a peaceful partner. It demonstrated Russia's willingness to use military force to achieve its geopolitical goals, directly challenging the post-Cold War security order in Europe. This was a clear sign that Russia's interests were fundamentally at odds with those of the West. I think there was actually a thing before as well in 2008 at that Munich Defence conference. I think Putin said that he wanted Ukraine to be part of Russia again. So 2008 maybe for Russia. And anyway, in 2014, China's expansion in the South China Sea. Around the same time, China began rapid large-scale construction of artificial islands in the South China Sea, militarizing the region and disregarding international law. This demonstrated its assertive and unilateral approach to territorial disputes, alarming its neighbours in the US and showing its willingness to project power beyond its borders. Yeah, so here we go. And then 2022, the alliance solidifies. February 2022, just before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia's president and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Beijing and declared a no-limits partnership. This declaration followed by China's steadfast political and economic support for Russia during the invasion of Ukraine, removed all doubt about their strategic alignment. The No Limits Alliance confirmed that Russia and China were not just separate challenges to the West, but a coordinated front aimed at reshaping the global order to be less Western-centric. Their shared grievances and opposition to US hegemony, combined with concrete actions, made it clear that they would prioritise their own interests over cooperation with the West. My point is, they could be part of the West, if you want to call it the First World, if you want to call it something like that. The First World, where it's democracies, and I mean, every country in the world, no country should be poor now, every country should be flourishing economically and democratically. Not necessarily as we see from China, but It should, everyone should love their country and want to stay and live there, but obviously that's not the case, including even for China and Russia. Alright, that's all for now. Bye bye.